Chapter 359. He put the book aside and looked up at her. Since you don't like it, you don't have to force yourself to learn it. It's getting late and you have to get up early to go back to the palace tomorrow. Go to bed early. Oh. Shinyueji shrugged her head. She saw the man stand up and open his arms to him. She stepped forward and helped him undress. The man was wearing a luxurious purple gold robe. The loose robe made him look a little thin. His handsome facial features and gentle temperament, coupled with the loose robe, made the man inexplicably more dignified. After taking off the man's robe, Shinyueji hesitantly looked at his clothes inside. The man's smooth chest was as white as a painting. It was very beautiful. She used to be most moved by the man's perfect body. She would only like it if she loved it. Now she looked at it indifferently. She even subconsciously compared him with Mo Wushang. Compared to this, it's like hell. She was selfish and partial to that man. She had completely felt that the man in front of her was not comparable to him. Shinyueji's mind was filled with thoughts of that man until her chin was lifted and she met the man's dark eyes. His warm lips curved into a smile. The man watched her blushing cheeks. What are you thinking about, Imperial Consort? Shinyueji took a deep breath and blushed. She turned her back and said, Your Majesty. Don't take off too much. Didn't you say that tomorrow morning? If you take it off, it will be very troublesome to wear clothes tomorrow. The man stared at her red ears and was slightly stunned. Then he chuckled, walked to the bed and sat down. But before he sat on the bed, he suddenly narrowed his brows and stood up. Shinyueji sensed such a huge commotion. She turned around and saw that the neatly folded bed had suddenly slithered out from under the blanket. It was as long as two people and as thick as an arm. Its black and yellow head was shaking its head and spitting out its tongue. Shinyueji was shocked. Perhaps seeing the girl's pale face, Feng Joqing came over and held her in his arms. With a wave of his hand, the big snake on the bed fell to the ground. The man's face didn't look good. He squinted at the long sword hanging on the wall and was about to take it. Shinyueji recognized the yellow snake as the one she had seen in Shinyuechi's backyard. Although there were many snakes like this in Shinyuechi's backyard, the one that was staring at her with glowing eyes was definitely the one that had rushed out when she opened the door. She hid behind the man and winked at the big yellow snake. The big yellow snake didn't know whether it understood or not. It stuck out its tongue at her and then slipped under the table. Under her gaze, it pushed the door with its head and crawled out. The big fat snake climbed on the ground as fast as a gust of wind. The corner of Shinyueji's mouth twitched as she buried her head in the man's arms. It's said that if you plant flowers and plants at home in this season, it's the easiest to attract these legless things. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have asked my father to plant so many flowers and plants in the backyard. I don't know how it broke in. Shinyueji looked at the bed with lingering fear when she recalled the big yellow snake hiding on the bed just now. Your Majesty, I'm afraid. I don't dare to go to bed anymore. Chapter 360. Feng Joqing ordered someone to come in and change the bedding. Before Shuangxi went out with the quilt in his arms, he stared at Shinyueji mysteriously for a while. Sure enough, after the servant left, a big white snake came out of nowhere from the newly changed bedding. Shinyueji didn't dare to sit on the bed because of the big yellow snake from before. Now, a white snake popped out from the changed bedding. In terms of size, it seemed to be 2 or 3 times bigger than the big yellow snake from before. And this snake looked huge, but it was not stupid at all, especially when it stared at her. It even winked at her shyly. The young emperor looked embarrassed. This time, without Shinyueji's wink, the big white snake still knew when to stop. It jumped down from the bed, opened the door and crawled out. Shinyueji trembled with fear. Your Majesty, didn't you just change the bedding? Why is there a snake? She stepped out and was about to go out. I'd better ask father to prepare another room. I'm scared, I want to sleep with mother. Usually, if a woman was afraid of something, she would subconsciously think of her mother. Feng Joqing couldn't bear to see her helpless, scared, and pretending to be strong. He patted the back of her hand. I ordered Ji Chu to scatter some things in the room to repel the snake. When I was sleeping at night, I vaguely heard something moving here. I was in a daze and thought I heard it wrong. I didn't expect it to be a snake. Shun Yueji sobbed in the emperor's arms. Did I spend a few nights with these two snakes before this? Thinking of this, Shun Yueji had a lingering fear, and tears of grievance hung on her face. The emperor gently wiped away the tears in the corner of her eyes. It's the season now, flowers and trees are indeed easy to attract snakes, don't be afraid. Two big snakes came out of the room in succession. Shunhe also knew the situation here, and immediately ordered the servants to change their room. Shun Yueji was the emperor's favorite concubine in name. No matter which room she changed, she had to sleep with the emperor. How could she leave so easily? Fortunately, when Feng Joqing saw the girl's delicate face, he specially asked Shun Yueji to stay with Shun Qiu, and when he left tomorrow, he would ask someone to call her. Lying on Shun Qiu's bed, Shunhe was driven to the side and made a mattress. Shun Qiu lovingly hugged her daughter. At least your eldest brother has some brains. I already said that if he drove all the spiders, flies, and snakes in his backyard into your room, wouldn't he be charged with murder by the emperor? The emperor is not a fool. This thing should be done in moderation. It's hard to guarantee that he won't be suspicious. Father Shun and Mother Shun echoed each other. After talking for a long time, they realized that the original owner of the body was lying on the bed without saying a word. Shunhe got up from the ground, a little worried. He walked to the edge of the bed and touched Shun Yueji's head. Daughter, are you scared? Father and mother have seen little white and little yellow with their own eyes. They have been trained by your big brother to understand human nature. When you were in the palace, they went on a hunger strike with your big brother. They almost starved to death because they missed you. Xiao Shun and Xiao Chen's father and said. Chapter 361. Mother Shun glared at him angrily and slapped his hand. Damn old thing, what are you talking about? Shun Yueji opened her eyes and looked at Mother Shun's kind face. Mother, do you trust me? Jia, what are you talking about? You are my daughter. If I don't trust you, who else should I trust? She frowned. What's wrong, Jia? You haven't said a word since you came out of your room. Did something happen? No. Shun Yueji shook her head and sat up. I just feel that it won't be too peaceful when we return to the capital tomorrow. Although His Majesty is traveling incognito, he has brought many secret guards with him. If Jia is still worried, the general's mansion will also send more people to protect you back to the capital. Looking back at her parents' faces, Shun Yueji smiled. I want to take a risk tomorrow. No. Shunhe rejected sternly and held her hand. You can't do anything risky. Even if someone wants to do something, it should be His Majesty. Jia is a woman, and a woman should stay in the boudoir. Even if she gets married, she should be protected by her husband. Shun Yueji knew that it was useless to tell them her plan. She just wanted to remind them. She lay on the bed again. Father, mother, I miss Mo Wushang a little. Shunhe lay on the mattress. Now that you mention it, I miss my son-in-law a little too. Jia, for the sake of this future son-in-law, I have been very quiet. I have chased away all the young masters that I had reserved. I even want to separate His Majesty. Yes, Jia, you and His Majesty haven't slept together yet, right? Faced with such straightforward words, Shun Yueji sat up and stared at Shun Qiu for a long time. Mother, you? Mother heard from eunuch Gao that His Majesty had also stayed in your Phoenix Palace for a few days during the month that I've been in the palace. Jia, you and His Majesty haven't. Shun Yueji held her forehead as she felt a headache coming on. No. Although His Majesty stayed with me in the same palace, he always went to review the memorials at night. Moreover, he would read them until dawn. He had already left for morning court before I woke up. Shun Qiu stroked her chest. That's good. My daughter is still innocent. Mother can see that the Prince Regent is infatuated with you. Jia, don't act recklessly. It's better to treat the Prince Regent better. A person like the Emperor is not suitable for you. Mother feels upset just by looking at him. Your mother is right. Jia, you can have many husbands, but your man can't. He must be devoted to you. When the time comes, you will accept the Prince Regent. Father will make a backyard for you. If any man is disobedient, you can divorce him. If he's obedient, you can give him a promotion and let him help you take care of your backyard. You can enjoy yourself outside as much as you want. The corner of Shin Yueji's mouth twitched. According to the Prince Regent's character, Father, are you sure he won't kill those men? Shunhee scratched his head and thought seriously for a while. That's true. It seems like I can only raise them secretly. As the saying goes, the flower in the house is not as wild as the hiss. Madam Shun threw a pillow at him. Shunhee immediately covered his head and lay on the ground, gasping. Shunhee, tell me clearly today. What do you mean by the flower in the house is not as fragrant as the wild flower? So you've been keeping other women outside, haven't you? Chapter 362. Shunhee grits his teeth in pain and stares at her tough look. I'll come back after the morning court. One day is so long, and I spend so much time on you. In addition to leading the troops to fight, I don't even go out to drink when they ask me to. How can I raise a woman? The man complains. Shun Qiu knows that she is at a disadvantage. She smiles guiltily. I know you are doing it for Jia's sake, but who told you to say it as if you have done it? If I don't hit you, who else can I hit? Shunhee covers his painful head and lies on the ground with his back to the mother and daughter in a huff without saying anything. Sleeping until the latter half of the night, Shun Qiu reckoned that Shin Yueji had fallen asleep. Shun Qiu sneakily crawled down from the bed and sat on Shunhee's body. She kissed his face that was also not asleep. Baby, I was wrong. Can you forgive me? Who told you to speak blindly? Shunhee covers his face that she kisses and turns over to press her under his body. You have no conscience. You only know to get down now. You are not serious. Keep your voice down. Our daughter is asleep. Don't wake her up. Shunhee is busy taking off her clothes. It doesn't matter. Our daughter has been sleeping since she was a child. There is no sound on the ground. Just don't shout later. Shun Qiu's face turns red because of her explicit words. However, he is too smooth in taking off her clothes. Shunhee is about to take off his pants and go in. Subconsciously, he heard Shun Qiu's words and glanced at the bed. This one look almost scared him to the point that he was crippled. He sees that Shin Yueji has got out of bed at some time. At the moment, she is wearing a piece of clothing. She is a step away from them, swinging her legs and watching them affectionately. No one knows how long she has been watching. The man lies on her for a long time without any reaction. Shun Qiu also slowly notices something. Following Shunhee's sight, she sees Shin Yueji sitting on the bed. She feels ashamed and buries her head in Shunhee's arms. You damn old thing, I told you not to come tonight. Jia is sleeping, but you have to make such a big noise. Now, how was she going to face others? Shunhee hurriedly tidied up his pants and helped Shun Qiu put on her clothes. He protected her in his arms and then looked at the girl sitting on the bed. Daughter, you're not asleep. When he said this, a trace of embarrassment could be seen on his face. Seeing his embarrassed look, Shin Yueji nodded and said, Yes, I heard the noise and thought that there were snakes in Dad and Mom's room again, so I woke up. Seeing their embarrassment, Shin Yueji draped a coat over herself. You guys continue. I can't sleep. I want to go out and take a look. Where are you going in the middle of the night, Jia? Shun Qiu's head popped out from Shunhee's embrace. Shin Yueji had an aggrieved look on her face. Just now when I saw father and mother being intimate, I suddenly thought of Mo Wushang. I want to see him. The Prince Regent's mansion and the General's mansion were in the same capital. Although the capital was big, the two mansions were not far from each other. It's good to miss men. Shunhee got up from the ground and said, Good girl, wait for me. Father will go and call someone to send you to the Prince Regent's mansion with Qinggong. I promise to bring you back before dawn. Shin Yueji sat there and didn't refuse. Two bright eyes stared at Shun Qiu. Mother, why are you sneakily looking at me? My daughter, I know that you didn't sleep with His Majesty, but could it be that you and the Prince Regent? Chapter 363. The secret guard dutifully sent her to the door of the Regent's mansion and put her down. Originally, He planned to send the miss directly to the regent's bed, but the regent's mansion was heavily guarded. He was considerate, but he didn't have the guts. The person who opened the door was an old housekeeper. Seeing a beautiful woman knocking on the door in the middle of the night, he subconsciously categorized her as that kind of woman. However, after Shin Yueji revealed her name, the old man's attitude took a 180-degree turn and he respectfully welcomed her in. "Miss Shin, this is the residence of the regent. I won't accompany you in." The brightly lit house in front of her was huge, several times larger than the Phoenix Palace where she lived. The luxurious exterior decoration was even more luxurious than the Imperial Palace. Although the regent's mansion was not as big as the Imperial Palace, everything here, including the trees and flowers, was as prosperous and expensive as the Imperial Palace. Along the way, Shin Yueji finally understood how rich Mo Wuxiang was. She didn't pay much attention to these vanity things, but looked at the room that was still lit in the middle of the night. "Doesn't your regent sleep in the middle of the night?" The old man hesitated. "Maybe it's because there are guests in the mansion tonight, so the regent slept a little later than usual." The old butler was afraid that if he said too much, Miss Shin would think that the regent had some eccentricities. According to Ji Chu, the regent had been very fond of this daughter of the Shin family recently. The old butler definitely didn't dare to tell her how the regent had lived for more than a month after the death of the late empress. "Guests?" Shin Yueji frowned. What kind of guests can make him stay up so late and discuss with guests? Shin Yueji's frown deepened. She walked past the old man and pushed the door to go in. Discussing business in the middle of the night. It couldn't be a woman, right? As Shin Yueji expected, the door was pushed open, and a delicate fragrance came from the room. Her vision swayed and she saw a woman in a revealing red dress. She was very close to Mo Wuxiang. Although she wasn't hanging onto his body, they were separated by a fist. As long as he stretched out his hand, he would be able to pull her slender waist into his embrace. The woman was very beautiful, and it would not be an exaggeration to describe her as a demoness who could bring disaster to a country. Her eyebrows were curved like willow leaves, and her skin was as fair as powder. Her eyes were big, brighter than crystal grapes, and very seductive. Her hand was still in the position of pushing the door open. She stood outside the door and looked at the two people inside. For some reason, she felt that the two of them standing together looked especially compatible. She didn't know what it would look like if she stood with Mo Wuxiang, but after seeing them, Shin Yueji realized that they were more suitable than her. At this moment, she couldn't tell what she was feeling in her heart. She just felt that her heart was in pain. Her expression was also indifferent. She didn't want to speak, and her entire person was sullen. She didn't say anything. Before leaving, she didn't forget to close the door for them, and then turned to leave. She shouldn't have come. She shouldn't have subconsciously thought of Mo Wuxiang when she saw her father and mother being intimate. She shouldn't have felt awkward when sleeping with Shin Qiu, and subconsciously wanted him to hug her to sleep. Chapter 364. The moment the door was closed, she couldn't see the expression on the man's face. But before she could take a few steps, a cold wind swept behind her. The next second, she was held tightly in the man's arms. Shin Yueji didn't struggle. She sniffed and said, "I'll give you a chance to explain. Give me a reasonable explanation. If I'm satisfied, I'll forgive you." Mo Wuxiang carried her back to the room. The woman was still standing in the distance. Her red clothes were bold and revealing, and her eyes were fixed on Shin Yueji. Shin Yueji probably noticed her gaze, so she looked back coldly. The woman in red was stunned, and then she smiled. "Shong." The word Shong was soft and gentle, with a charm from the depths of a person's body. Even Shin Yueji, a woman, couldn't help but feel a ripple in her heart and look at her a few more times. The man's handsome face was tense, and he didn't even look at her. Instead, he gently helped Shin Yueji to put on her clothes. Her hands were a little cold after running all the way here. The cold wind in the middle of the night was heavy. He hugged her lovingly, and his movements were very careful. But when he talked to the woman in red, he was extremely impatient and indifferent. "Get lost. You can't forget your old love when you have a new one. Shong, look at me." In terms of appearance, I'm not worse than her, am I? In terms of figure, I'm more exquisite than her. Speaking of this, she turned around boldly in front of the two of them. Then she put her hands on the table, looked at Shen Yueji's cold eyes, and smiled. How long have you known Ashong? I'm afraid he didn't tell you about our relationship, did he? I don't know how unforgettable it is. Shen Yueji was not a person who could stand provocation. This woman said these words in front of her, which was undoubtedly provocation. She gave Mo Wushang enough time to explain to her, but he didn't say a word until now. If it was someone else, Shen Yueji would have already lashed out with her whip. But in front of a man, she didn't want to lose her composure. Wasn't it just a man? She and Mo Wushang were just using each other. They hadn't reached the point where they couldn't live without him. In the past, Feng Jiuqing had been so affectionate towards her and was even willing to give up his life for her. In the end, didn't he completely bury himself for his empire? Sending himself to his death? She smiled coldly and pried open the man's fingers one by one. It's getting late. This consort took the liberty to come here and disturb the two of you reminiscing about old times. It's indeed my fault. I'm sorry, I'll be leaving now and won't be coming back again. She got up to leave. In the meantime, the man came over to pull her. Shen Yueji was enraged, and without thinking, she slapped him. This slap was very hard, and when she saw the man's fair face, she immediately revealed 5 finger marks. The woman in red covered her mouth in disbelief. When the slap landed on Mo Wushang's face, one could vaguely hear the sound of her sucking in a breath of cold air. Mo Wushang didn't get angry. His expression was indifferent, and even the way he looked at Shen Yueji was the same as before. It was silent, but filled with endless affection. Jia, believe me, I won't betray you. When this slap landed, Shen Yueji regretted it in her heart. Chapter 365. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. I couldn't sleep at night, and I heard Jichu say that you were busy, so I came to see you. I've been out for so long. If the Emperor's people notice something, I'm afraid they will be suspicious. I should go back. She tried to make her face look indifferent. She turned around. Mo Wushang didn't get up to take her hand this time. But when Shen Yueji walked to the door, it was locked from the outside. She couldn't get out even if she wanted to. She turned around and glared at him. What are you doing? He wouldn't let her go. A coquettish fox was seducing him in the room, saying a few provocative words from time to time. The man was indifferent and didn't explain, but he still let her take advantage of him. Seeing her reaction, Mo Wushang's dark eyes flickered, and there was a layer of warmth in them. Jia, he is actually. Ah Shong, look at what kind of woman you found. Doesn't the little one know how to bow to the big one? He even dared to hit you. Come, let me take a look. Look at your face. Look at how badly you've beaten him up. The woman in red was so distressed that she wanted to throw herself into his arms. Her tone was sweet and charming. The man's cold eyes suddenly became cold and contracted. Even the aura in the room froze at this moment, as if it wanted to freeze 1 to 3 feet. The woman in red immediately stopped on the spot, not daring to take another step forward. However, her mouth was still unconvinced as she muttered, "What are you doing? You weren't like this in the past." In bed, you. Mo Wushang. This time, Shen Yueji was completely furious. She didn't have a whip in her hand. He should be glad that he didn't carry a whip with him. Otherwise, it wouldn't be his own hand that she used to whip him. She stretched out her foot and kicked the door several times. I said let me out, didn't you hear me? Hurry up and open the door. Her face was dark and cold, and even her tone was full of impatience. If you looked closely, you could see the crystal tears at the corner of her eyes. However, she forced herself to swallow it back. The man got up and strode to her, ignoring her struggle, and held her in his arms. His thin lips pressed against her soft ears, and he gently coaxed her, "Don't cry. Let me go." Shen Yueji struggled hard in his arms. Jia, he's a man, not a woman. This sentence caused Shen Yueji to be silent for a long time. Looking at her silence, Mo Wushang knew that she listened to his words. He put his thin lips on her pink neck and kissed it gently. He's just. No wonder you can promise me that I'll be your only woman in the future, in the past and in the present. Mo Wushang, I was wrong about you. So you like men? Phut, the man in red couldn't help but cover his mouth and burst into laughter. Hearing this laughter, Shen Yueji looked past Mo Wushang's stiff body to look at him. Mo Wushang said that he was a man. Now, she took a closer look at him. His skin was fair, his legs were long and slender, and even that face that could bring calamity to a nation made one unable to look away. Also, his voice was sweet and charming, and it was impossible to tell if he was a man or a woman. Perhaps because she was looking at him seriously, Shen Yueji's eyes fell on his chest, and she found that his chest was flat. Generally, if a coquettish vixen like her was really a woman, her chest would definitely be bigger than other women. It was impossible for it to be flat to this extent. Chapter 366. The anger in her heart didn't lessen. Instead, it deepened. If she hadn't pushed the door open, this man would have jumped into her arms. And Mo Wushang didn't reject her. If she hadn't spoken up, perhaps the two of them would have hugged each other. Who knew, in the end, they might have rolled onto the bed together. If you like men, tell me. Why are you pestering me? At least I'm straight. She didn't mind two men liking each other. She just couldn't accept it. To her, Mo Wushang would rather be with a woman than a man. I won't disturb you anymore. Jia, it's not what you see. There's nothing going on between us. Mo Wushang felt a headache coming on, especially when he saw Shen Yueji's calm face. Although the anger was gone, her face was still unfamiliar and calm. This made Mo Wushang feel inexplicably anxious. I'm talking to him about something. Can he almost talk about being in your arms and holding you together when we talk about it? Would a normal man call you our Shong so intimately when talking about something? The man in red, Mo Wushang, Jia, you don't have to explain. I understand. I knew you hated me for so long. You must have some ulterior motive for suddenly being so nice to me. Isn't your motive? The man's voice was low. Shen Yueji's eyes reddened instantly. She stared at him. You're being mean to me. The man choked and softened his tone helplessly. He hugged her and rubbed his chin against her restless head. How can I be mean to you when I can't even wait to love you? Jia, believe me, okay? I really only like you from the beginning. You really only like me. I'm the only woman you like. But you like men. Liking men is different from liking women. The man in red snorted a few times. Hearing him laugh, Shen Yueji couldn't help but stare at him. She narrowed her eyes dangerously. Is it funny? The man in red stopped laughing immediately and said with a serious face, no. In his heart, he silently prayed for his friend of many years. What kind of troublesome daughter-in-law did he find? Look at this wild cat. Not only was it hard to coax, but it was also insatiable. Especially the slap he gave to Mo Wushang without any hesitation, he was still in a daze. Ever since he was young, who dared to hit him? Even those enemies who wished for Mo Wushang to die would not dare to even touch a single strand of his hair, let alone hit him. However, this woman was different. Not only did she hit him, but Mo Wushang did not get angry. Instead, he even had to lower himself to coax her. Not only was it hard to believe, but it was also inconceivable. Hong Fui. Mo Wushang lightly spat out 3 words from his thin lips. When the man in red heard his name, he immediately pricked up his ears, only to see the man lowering his head and explaining to Shen Yueji with a doting expression. He grew up with me. His personality is different from other men. He likes to cause trouble and is flamboyant. Don't lower yourself to his level. There's nothing between me and him. Shen Yueji was quiet for a moment. Then you two stayed in the same room in the middle of the night, and he was already charging at you. Why didn't you dodge? Chapter 367. Mo Wushang was the regent of the foam country. In private, there must be a lot of things that couldn't be said in public. So Shen Yueji didn't ask much. She just listened to his explanation and went out. The man followed her out without hesitation. Why are you here suddenly? If you want to see me, ask someone in your mansion to tell me. It's windy outside. I'll go find you myself. It's nothing. I just suddenly wanted to see you. Now that I've seen you, I should go back. Before she turned around, the man's tall body pulled her into his arms again and hugged her tightly. He hugged himself very tightly, so tightly that there was not a single gap left. What are you doing? Let go of me. I should go back. Shin Yueji felt uncomfortable being hugged so tightly by him. She didn't think about it and tried to break his hand. However, the man directly lifted her chin and kissed her. For a moment, her mouth was filled with the familiar smell of the man. The moment his lips and tongue came in, Shin Yueji opened her mouth subconsciously. He chased after her little tongue playfully and tangled with her. After the kiss, she gasped heavily. Being pulled into the man's arms gently, she heard the man's low laughter. I'm very happy. Shin Yueji's little face was a little red from the kiss. She leaned against his chest. The cold wind couldn't blow in, and the blush on her face didn't go away for a long time. If we encounter such things in the future, can't you explain it to me quickly? You're very happy to see me angry, aren't you? Because he wanted to see her jealous look. It looked very real, but it was very far away from him, like a dream. If he hadn't seen the tears at the corner of her eyes, Mo Wushang might have looked at her a little longer. She was angry, which meant that she had him in her heart and cared about him. That was why he wanted to see her angry look more. He wanted to know that he still had a place in her heart. Although it wasn't a deep place, he knew that she was not indifferent to his existence in her heart. At least she would feel uncomfortable when she saw him with other women. Even if he wouldn't be with other women. It's going to be dawn soon. I should go back and pack up a bit. When dawn comes, I'll set off with His Majesty back to the palace. After staying in the man's arms for a while, Shin Yueji leaned against his chest, listening to his strong heartbeat, and spoke in a muffled voice. Actually, she didn't really suspect Mo Wushang. It was just that she was a little unhappy at that moment. Now that she knew about it, she was a little depressed that she had lost her composure. I'll send you back, okay? No need. Don't the two of you have something to discuss? I can go back by myself. The man was silent for a while. Hong Fui did have something important to discuss with him. Looking at the little woman in his arms, it was obvious that she did not want him to send her back. He paused for a moment. Should I ask Ji Chu to send you back? Shin Yueji said nothing. The man's voice became gentler. I'm worried about you going back alone. Let him send you. All right. Coming out of the man's embrace, Shin Yueji looked at the man's handsome face and suddenly called his name, Mo Wushang. The man lowered his eyes to look at her. Will you use me? I won't. These two words were resolute and decisive. Chapter 368. Then I will go back first. Ji Chu. Yes, Master. TSK. This person has gone far. Did his soul follow him? Hong Fui crossed his arms and walked out of the room. He stopped in front of the man and teased him. Mo Wushang didn't look at him. Go back. I will not go with you. Hey. Hong Fui squinted his eyes dangerously. Mo Wushang, what do you mean? You promised to go back with me. Why should I go back alone? I will not be able to explain to the Empress Dowager. He saw that Mo Wushang was about to leave and quickly walked over to stop him. Mo Wushang, have you forgotten your identity? Have you forgotten your mission? After staying in the Foam Kingdom for so many years, do you really think of yourself as a citizen of the Foam Kingdom? Looking at the man's indifferent black eyes, Hong Fui's face turned cold. Did you fall in love with that woman just now? The answer was non-committal. The man raised his eyebrows. Hong Fui looked at him in disbelief. What about Jiu Yuqin? Did you fall in love with Jiu Yuqin? No. I know that Jiu Yuqin was harmed because of the Empress Dowager. If you didn't leave Feng Nation at that time, perhaps that woman wouldn't have died at all. However, you have to remember that a person with a big goal shouldn't be tied down by love. Wushang, there are millions of people in the North Underworld. Are you going to watch them rely on an environment without a leader? The man didn't speak but walked past him with a cold face. Hong Fui frowned. The Empress Dowager ordered you to leave with me tonight and rush back to the northern underworld. Otherwise. He paused for a moment. I know I can't beat you, but I will use all my strength to tie you up and bring you back. If you like that woman just now, I can tie her up for you and bring her back to the North Underworld. You can do whatever you want. Wushang, Jiu Yuqin is dead. Now the North Underworld needs you. You have been fighting with the Empress Dowager for so long. It's enough. Don't forget that she is your mother, your biological mother. Don't touch her. If you dare to touch her, I will not let you go easily. After saying this, the man turned around and entered the room. Hong Fui wanted to follow, but just as he was about to step into the room, a strong inner force came from the room, and the door closed with a bang. Fortunately, he reacted in time. He quickly took a few steps back and narrowly avoided getting his nose smashed. The Empress Dowager is your mother. During the time you were away from the Northern Underworld, she has been helping you with the affairs of the palace. The Empress Dowager is old and can't manage much for you. The Northern Underworld is your country. The ministers in the court and the people in the capital are all your people. If you continue to be stubborn like this, when the time comes, I've said it before, in my heart, even the millions of innocent people in the North Underworld. The door was pushed open, revealing the man's handsome and natural facial features. His indifferent aura was daunting. His facial features were perfect and flawless, like a sculpture. His hands were behind his back, and his loose black robe made him look like a statue of a god. He looked at him with disdain and spoke slowly, but it revealed endless determination and undeniability. It can't compare to a single hair of hers. But she's dead. Hong Fui's heart was cold. Even if she was a dead person now, her position in his heart was still so heavy that it had never changed. Chapter 369. Who is that person? He is a friend of Master. Ji Chu drove the carriage. When he heard the woman's questioning voice coming from the carriage, he answered respectfully. Friend. Why don't I know? Ji Chu smiled. Mr. Fui has always been elusive and rarely appears in the capital. He just arrived tonight, so it is normal that Miss Shen has not seen him. He is not from the Foam Kingdom. Ji Chu probably did not expect Shen Yueji to say that he was not from the Foam Kingdom so straightforwardly. He paused and nodded. Yes. Where is he from? Ji Chu hesitated. He is from the North Underworld. The North Underworld. The North Underworld, Nanyu, and the Foam Kingdom were known as the three biggest countries in the world. She had heard about the tyrannical nature of the Emperor of Nanyu and his love for beauties. As for the Emperor of the North Underworld, it was said that the Empress Dowager had been managing the court. Some people said that there was no emperor in the North Underworld and the country belonged to the Empress Dowager. Some people said that the Empress Dowager took away the military power of the North Underworld Emperor and imprisoned him in the palace. There were many rumors about the North Underworld in the world and it was difficult to distinguish the truth from the lies. But it was too far away and Shen Yueji was not interested in these things, so she only heard some rumors. What is the relationship between your master and the North Underworld? Ji Chu scratched his head awkwardly. Although his master liked Miss Shen very much, but there were some things that he really did not know whether to tell Miss Shen or not. What if he said something that he shouldn't have and harmed his master? Since Master likes Miss Shen so much, if Miss Shen has any questions, you can ask Master yourself, this subordinate. Yes, I understand. Shen Yueji did not push him too much. She leaned on the soft cushion and put a piece of Osmanthus cake into her mouth, but the man named Hong Fui just now is quite good-looking. Ji Chu said. Miss Shen, Mr. Fui's appearance is neither a man nor a woman. How can he be compared to my master? Really? I think that Hong Fui's appearance is not worse than your master. Moreover, he looked much more enthusiastic than Mo Wushang. Shen Yueji's seemingly meaningful words caused Ji Chu's heart to beat wildly. Did Miss Shen have a change of heart after seeing Mr. Fui's appearance? The entire Dark North Kingdom had heard of Hong Fui's looks. The title of the first young master of the North Underworld was naturally Mr. Fui. Moreover, according to Hong Fui's character, if he knew that Miss Shen was interested in him, Ji Chu felt that his hand that was holding the reins was trembling. Miss Shen, Did master do something to displease you? Please say it. When we return, this subordinate will tell my master. My master promises to change. It's nothing. I just feel that your master has been hiding too much from me. I'm a narrow-minded person and I can't tolerate anyone lying to me. Furthermore, your master has promised me that he would never hide anything from me. If she hadn't bumped into him tonight, she probably wouldn't have known who Hong Fui was. She also wouldn't have known that Hong Fui was actually in contact with the people of the North Underworld. There are some things that master doesn't want Miss Shen to know for her own good. After all, Miss Shen is a woman. The things about the North Sea and the Phoenix Nation. Chapter 370. Ji Chu subconsciously tightened the reins when he heard the meaning in her words. Miss Shen. Don't worry, I won't think too much. I won't say what I shouldn't say either. After all, what I have in mind is just a guess. Let me down at the inn in front. Master has ordered. It's better for me to send Miss Shen back to the general's residence. Then, Ji Chu urged the horse forward. Shun Yueji frowned. The general's residence is at the corner in front. If I'm in danger, I can just shout and the people in the general's residence will hear me. After all, you're a secret guard of the regent's residence. You're always exposed when you're with the regent. Moreover, the emperor brought a lot of people. Do you want the emperor to suspect me? Ji Chu didn't dare to be stubborn anymore. He stopped the carriage in front of the inn. Miss Shen, please. After getting off the carriage, Shun Yueji glanced at him and nodded. You can go back. Yes. After Ji Chu left, Shun Yueji didn't go back to the general's residence directly. Instead, she looked at the inn in front of her, hesitated for a moment, and then walked in. Because it was the middle of the night and the sky was about to brighten, there were no customers. When she entered, she could only see the flickering candlelight and blurry figures. However, two familiar figures by the window caught her eyes first. She found an inconspicuous place. When the waiter came to greet her, she put a silver ingot on the table and signaled him to be quiet. The waiter happily took the silver and carefully retreated. Father, you've been here for a day. It's time to go back. A handsome man in a white robe was expressionless. His black eyes were locked on the drunk middle-aged man opposite him. He frowned and something flashed across his dark eyes. He grabbed the wine jar. Father is the first-grade Prime Minister of Feng Country. If you're seen like this, it'll be a scandal. First-grade Prime Minister? Ji Wei sneered at himself. Why don't I remember that I'm still the first-grade Prime Minister of Feng Country? He grabbed the wine jar from Jiu Mujue. I'm not going back. Why should I go back? To face your mother's unpleasant face. No matter what I do, I won't be able to enter her eyes. No matter what I do, I'm the selfish one. I'm the cruel one. I'm the one who does everything. Jua, tell me, why is your mother so ruthless? It's been more than 20 years. In these 20 years, I gave her whatever she wanted. Even if she didn't want it, I would try my best to get it for her and personally offer it to her. In the end, she regards it as a treasure, a priceless treasure. Not to mention liking it, even looking at it is an insult to her eyes. I'm in a high position. I'm the first-rank Prime Minister of the Feng Nation. What can I not have? Even the current emperor has to give me some face. Which of the officials lower than me doesn't have 3 or 4 wives? What about me? I only guarded her. Even though she was old and faded, I still didn't take a concubine. She, on the other hand, can't wait for me to take concubines. When I don't want them, she drugged me, stripped them naked, and sent them to my bed. Jiu Wei was really drunk. In the past, he would never say these things in front of his son. However, this time, he kept talking as if he was pouring out all the grievances and unwillingness in his heart. Chapter 371. Hair. I'm raising someone else's bastard for her. What did I say? She. Jiu Wei gulped down a few mouthfuls of wine when he mentioned the sad past. Shen Yueji wasn't in the mood to listen to them talking about the past. She just found it strange that they were still in the inn in the middle of the night. She didn't expect to hear this. At that moment, her hands were cold. An indescribable emotion overflowed and she tightened her hands on the table. What did he mean by Murong-yoon being unmarried and pregnant? What did he mean by he was raising another man's bastard for Murong-yoon? She wasn't Ji-Yu Wei's child. Before Murong-yoon married him, he was already pregnant with her. Thinking of her childhood in the Prime Minister's mansion, Ji-Yu Wei's love and indulgence among all the children, but she was the only one he didn't like. Shin Yueji finally understood that she wasn't his flesh and blood. It wasn't just because Murong-yoon didn't like her, so he didn't like her either. It was because she wasn't born by him. She was born by Murong-yoon and another man. According to Ji-Yu Wei's arrogance, how could he treat the woman he liked and the child born by another man? There was a teapot on the table. She felt her mouth was dry and poured a cup into her mouth. Then she poured a second cup. She was just curious when she saw them here, but she didn't expect to hear this. Speaking of which, Ji-Yu Yuchin is really pitiful. If it wasn't because her mother was pregnant with her, she might have eloped with that man and I wouldn't have anything to do with it. Her mother didn't like her and she was a bastard born by another man. How could I like her? Hair. Every time I see Yuna beating and humiliating her, I feel happy. That little bitch. It's a pity that she died too early. I didn't even have the chance to vent the hatred in my heart before she passed away so early. What a pity. When she mentioned Ji-Yu Yuchin, Ji-Yu Mujue's dark eyes suddenly contracted. For a moment, the atmosphere in the inn dropped a lot. But Ji-Yu Wei didn't seem to feel it. He was still smiling coldly. Ji-Yu Yuchin looks so much like that man, so much like him. He murmured and then drank a few mouthfuls of wine. Ji-Yu Mujue's deep gaze fell on the countless empty jars on the coffee table. The big hand under the brocade robe couldn't help but tighten. He went to help Ji-Yu Wei up. "Father, you're drunk. I'll send you back." "I'm not drunk. I'm not going back. You want me to go back and face your mother's cold face? Let me stay here, He let out a drunken belch. His vision became hazy and he fell asleep on the table. From the beginning to the end, Ji-Yu Mujue didn't say anything unnecessary. Instead, she supported Ji-Yu Wei and walked out. When he reached the door, Shin Yueji didn't know if it was an illusion, but he purposely paused. When Shin Yueji looked up again, the man was already far away. She pinched her eyebrows and glanced at the jars of wine on the table. He stood up and left. But just when she walked to the door, the man in front of her was dressed in white, his handsome face indifferent, expressionlessly looking at her. Shin Yueji knew that the pause she felt was not an illusion. He stood there. Although he didn't block her way, when Shin Yueji walked forward, he deliberately moved his feet. His intention was obvious. "How much did you hear?" Chapter 372. The man's eyes were indifferent without any extra emotion. His short sentence didn't have any emotional fluctuations. She understood that he was talking about what she had heard just now. Shin Yueji took a step back and leaned against the door. She looked at him up and down. "What should I say? If I say I didn't hear it, first young master Ji-Yu may not believe me. But if I say I heard it, will first young master Ji-Yu kill me? Speaking of which, it's really quite shocking. No wonder your entire Ji-Yu family doesn't like Ji-Yu Yuchin. She's a child that Madame Murong had with another man. But since Madame Murong was pregnant with Ji-Yu Yuchin first, why does Ji-Yu Yuchin call you brother? In terms of age, shouldn't she be a few years older than you?" As long as she could remember, Ji-Yu Mujue had existed in the Ji-Yu family. After hearing what Ji-Yu Wei said when he was drunk, Shin Yueji suspected that Ji-Yu Mujue was only 1 year older than her. If she was the child of Murong-yoon and another man, then what about him? He was also Murong-yoon's flesh and blood. He was born 1 year earlier than her. Was he also Ji-Yu Wei's child? Seeing the man's cold and lonely lips were almost pressed into a straight line. Shin Yueji smiled slightly. "First young master Ji-Yu is angry? Imperial concubine Shin, I hope you can keep this matter in your heart forever. There is no wall in the world that doesn't have a crack. I don't like to keep things in my heart. First young master wants me to keep it in my heart, But I won't let it rot in my heart. Not only that, I will also tell others about it. At that time, the whole capital will be talking about Madame Murong and Prime Minister Jiyu married. The man interrupted her in a low voice. He clenched his fists under his long sleeves. Yuqin has no grudge against you. If you do this, her reputation will be ruined. A wild girl born by a slut didn't even know who her biological father was. Jiyu Yuqin had a bad reputation when she was alive. After her death, the rumors about her had died down a lot. If something like this happened to the Jiyu family at this time, she would be mentioned again. Yuqin. Shun Yueji looked at him amusedly. Was the relationship between the late Empress and young master very good? Why did I hear that when the late Empress was being beaten by Madame Murong's men, you were just watching coldly from the side? Forget about stopping her, you even turned a blind eye when the late Empress asked you for help. What? Now you know how to care for your sister. From the looks of it, the late Empress doesn't seem to be your sister, young master. A chill suddenly burst out from the man's body, wishing that it could freeze people 3 feet. Shun Yueji smiled faintly, showing no signs of weakness. Just based on her status alone, no matter how harsh her words were, even if it didn't reach Jiyu Mujue's ears, she could be sure that he wouldn't dare to do anything to her. Shun Yueji took a step forward. If it had been anyone else here today, as long as it wasn't me, surely young Master Jiyu would have already killed her. Jiyu Mujue didn't say anything. She looked at her with her dark eyes. Your Jiyu family and my Shun family have always been at odds with each other in the capital. You still want me to help you hide it? She laughed coldly. Young Master Jiyu, don't you think that's too wishful thinking? Her gaze subconsciously swept towards the wooden fox carving hanging on his waist. Chapter 373. His bloodless thin lips were pursed into a straight line. After a long time, she heard his cold voice. You can state your conditions. Shun Yueji stretched out her white hand. Okay, this is what young master said. Give me the wooden fox in your hand, and I will pretend that nothing happened tonight, and I have not heard anything. She accurately saw the killing intent flashing in the man's eyes. Shun Yueji smiled. What? You are not willing? Jiyu Mujue clenched the little fox in his hand. Why it? Seeing young Master Jiyu so nervous, I think this little fox is very important to you. Gold and silver jewelry are rare treasures in the world. According to my identity, I naturally do not lack them. On the contrary, the little fox worn by young Master Goosewaist is very attractive to me. I just don't know how sincere young Master Jiyu is. Young Master Jiyu. Shun Yueji suddenly approached him. In an instant, his nose was filled with the fresh fragrance of a young girl. The man frowned. Shun Yueji stood on tiptoe and blew hot air into his ear. It was ticklish and numb, with a giggle. I kindly remind young Master Jiyu that the Emperor returned to the capital this time and brought back a monk. It seems that intentionally or unintentionally, he wants to replace your Jiyu family's position in the court. What did you say? Shun Yueji shrugged slightly. How can you and I, an imperial concubine and a minister, see through the emperor's mind? Now, the Jiyu and Shun families are like the sun in the sky in the capital. The emperor is afraid, so he wants to get rid of them. Young Master Jiyu is a smart man. Sometimes, just by looking at a person, he can see their thoughts and thoughts. As for the emperor, you have followed him for so many years, it seems that you should understand him a little bit. Imperial concubine Shun told me this. Aren't you afraid that I will expose you to the emperor? You won't. Shun Yueji's bright eyes flickered a few times. If it was anyone in your Jiyu family, but young Master Jiyu, you won't. I can see that you seem to dislike the emperor very much. She already knew that Jiyu Mujue did not like Feng Jiuqing. On the surface, he was still respectful, but in reality, every time they met, the respect in his eyes did not reach the depths of his eyes. Instead, there was a layer of coldness. Even yesterday at the general's mansion, after Feng Jiuqing appeared, he did not say a word. His dark eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. In the past, Shun Yueji did not understand why Jiyu Mujue hated Feng Jiuqing so much. After she married Feng Jiuqing, She hated him for a long time because of Jiyu Mujue's dislike of Feng Juqing. Now, when she looked at him again, she didn't find him so annoying. Really? The corners of the man's lips lifted and he sneered. Although I don't like your Jiyu family, eldest young master is much better than those unreasonable people in the Jiyu family. That's why I'm still willing to talk to eldest young master. Why do you think the emperor's thoughts are so hard to understand? The important ministers of the two families are willing to sacrifice their lives for him. Their loyalty is so great that they want to dig out their hearts and show it to him. He, on the other hand, is still blindly suspicious and jealous, and even wants to get rid of him. By doing so, who knows how many officials' hearts have turned cold? Chapter 374. Young Master Jiyu, don't be so direct. This is not a cooperative relationship. I mean to protect our Shen family and the Jiyu family. What does the life and death of the Jiyu family have to do with me? The cold and decisive words made the smile on Shen Yueji's face freeze for a moment. What did Jiyu Mujue mean? Was he not a member of the Jiyu family? It was as if he saw the surprise on her face that she did not have time to hide. The man put one hand behind his back and stared at her for a while. If it is a cooperative relationship between us, I can consider it. If it is for the sake of the Jiyu and Shen families, then there is no need to mention it. Compared to the Jiyu and Shen families, Shen Yueji actually hoped to cooperate alone. In this way, the Shen family would not be involved and would not face danger. However, Jiyu Mujue's indifference to the Jiyu family's life and death was somewhat unexpected. However, knowing his character, Shen Yueji didn't press him further. For Jiyu Mujue, she still had some trust in him. He was different from those people in the Jiyu family who went back on their words. As long as he promised, he would definitely do it. He would never go back on his word, even if they were on opposite sides. Shen Yueji suddenly pulled her lips and smiled. Well, since young Master Jiyu is so straightforward, then it is a personal cooperation between us. It has nothing to do with the Jiyu and Shen families. I just don't know. She paused. When the time comes, will young Master Jiyu deliberately take sides? I will do what I say. Since I have promised young Master Shen, I will not go back on my word. I know what Imperial Consort wants. Perhaps Imperial Consort doesn't know what I want now, but sooner or later, you'll know. Jiyu Mujue was indifferent. Shen Yueji really did not know what he wanted. He said he wanted the throne, but he was so indifferent to it. He said he wanted something else, but according to his status, what could he not have? However, the fact that he agreed to cooperate with her so readily meant that Shen Yueji smiled slightly. At that time, if Prime Minister Jiyu wants to do anything to the Shen family, I hope young Master Jiyu can inform me. As long as the Shen family is honest, the Jiyu family will not do anything. Young Master Jiyu, what benefits do you want from me? Just say it. You only need to inform me of His Majesty's movements. You don't need to do anything else. Actually, young Master has found the wrong person regarding the Emperor's movements. I think that the Empress should be the clearest about it. If young Master wants to know about the Emperor's movements, when she saw the man's handsome brows, she suddenly narrowed her eyes, as if she was impatient. Shen Yueji nodded. All right. He returned from the inn. It was already dawn. Shen Yueji thought about it along the way. Why did she suddenly cooperate with Jiyu Mujue? It was completely subconscious. She couldn't fight against Feng Juqing by herself. Moreover, Mo Wushang was hiding something from her. He probably had a lot of things to do as well. She didn't want to disturb him at this time and distract him. In addition, Feng Juqing wanted to get rid of the Jiyu and Shen clans. The Jiyu clan was extremely loyal, and if Feng Juqing did not reveal his true colors, they would not believe him at all. However, Feng Juqing was the kind of person who, even if you were dead, would still think that he was a good person, a sage. She took a deep breath and recalled what Jiyu Mujue had said to her before she left. Sometimes, if necessary, she really needed to cooperate with Jiyu Mujue. Chapter 375. She said that she wanted to cooperate with him, but secretly, she just wanted to destroy them. And Jiyu Mujua seemed to have seen through her mind. He had purposely left the Jiyu family out of the picture, as if he would ignore her no matter what she wanted to do. "Where did you go?" The man's gentle voice, with a trace of hoarseness, was just waking up. Hearing this familiar voice, Shin Yueji suddenly turned her head. Feng Joqing came out with only a piece of clothing, and his hair was not tied up, a little messy. His fair face in the hazy sky had a different kind of beauty. His black eyes were as gentle as ever, and at this moment, he was looking at her gently. Shin Yueji lowered her head subconsciously. "I couldn't sleep, so I got up and strolled in the yard." Speaking of this, she thought of something and hurriedly added, "I didn't eat much last night, so I was suddenly hungry. I originally planned to go to the kitchen to get something to eat, but found that the servants were all asleep, so I planned to go out to buy something alone, but I didn't expect that the shops were closed, so I sat in an inn for a while." She explained everything that needed to be explained in one breath. She accurately saw the man's gentle eyebrows shake, and suddenly looked at her with a low smile. Why does Imperial Concubine's eagerness to explain give me the illusion that there is a ghost in her heart? This concubine is just being honest. If I had known this, I wouldn't have slept with father and mother. At such an old age, you are still so kind. Shin Yueji stopped talking in time, covered her mouth, blushed, and secretly looked at the young emperor who was staring at her. "Your Majesty, you woke up so early. Are you going to return to the palace now?" "I suddenly woke up, and saw that the sky was a little brighter, so I came out to have a look." "So your Majesty is the same as this concubine?" Shin Yueji stepped forward, walked in front of him, and pulled his wide sleeve. "Your Majesty, it's cold outside, let's hurry into the room, what if you get a cold?" Feng Joqing let her pull him. After taking a few steps, the man suddenly grabbed her hand and interlocked his fingers with hers. "I had wanted Imperial Consort to stay in the manor for a few more days, but Jun has been away from the palace for so long, and there are a lot of trivial matters in the court that Jun has to deal with. Your Majesty, this concubine understands. As the Emperor of Feng Country, Your Majesty is always busy with official business. Your Majesty has already given this concubine a few days to accompany father and mother. This concubine is already very satisfied." She leaned on the man's shoulder, her small face slightly red. "Your Majesty treats this subject's concubine well, this subject's concubine knows. Your Majesty does not need to blame yourself." The man pinched her nose and said, "It's good that you know it. I really don't want to make you feel wronged." The man's palm was dry and warm. When his smooth fingers pinched her nose, his movements were extremely gentle, as if he was afraid of hurting her. She followed him back to the house. Shin Yueji poured him a cup of water. "Emperor, this concubine saw the monk you brought back last night." "Oh." The movement of the man's hand paused, and then he took the tea that she handed him as if nothing had happened just now. "Did the Imperial concubine see him?" Chapter 376. The man smiled and put down the teacup in his hand. In recent days, the rumors about the late empress have been spreading in the court. I need to ask Master Kong Yin to do a ceremony. When he mentioned Jiyu Yuqin, she could see the obvious pain in his eyes. It appeared quickly and disappeared quickly as well. It was fleeting. In Shin Yueji's words, it was just right. Shin Yueji restrained the obscurity in her eyes. Didn't His Majesty say that he doesn't believe in these nonsense? Why? Asking Kong Yin is just an explanation to the people in the palace. The man took a sip of tea. It's dawn. Does Imperial Consort have anything to say to General Shun and Shun Furen? She knew that Feng Joqing was giving her a chance to say goodbye to Shun He and Shun Qiu. She hesitated for a moment but still nodded. Father and mother know that His Majesty is going back to the palace today. I will go and remind them. En. After leaving the room, Shin Yueji went all the way to Shun Qiu's room. She saw that both of them were dressed neatly, especially Shun He, who looked high-spirited. She frowned with some dissatisfaction. Father, did you forget that you are sick? How can His Majesty think that you are really sick when you look like this? That's right. It's all your fault. I almost forgot about it. Shun Qiu had been well nourished last night and almost forgot that his attire was too incompatible. She ordered him to lie on the bed again. He looked at them worriedly. Daughter, His Majesty is going back to the palace. Do you think His Majesty will be angry if father lies down like this? No, His Majesty knows that father is sick, so he doesn't need to get up to send him off. His Majesty asked me to come here to inform father and mother that there is no need to follow so many rules. His Majesty is going out incognito, so he should go back incognito. Shun Qiu understood her words. All right, mother understands. Jia must be very careful when you go back. This time you are going out with His Majesty. I don't know how that little girl of the Jiyu family will bear a grudge against you. You must be more vigilant. If you can't handle it, close the palace and wait for father and mother to rush to save you. Mother Shun's love, whether it was in her heart or in her eyes, was undisguised. Shun Yueji's heart softens. She looks at her mother and smiles. Mother, don't worry. Your daughter will be fine. Not only your daughter, but also the Shun family. As long as your daughter is alive, the Shun family will never fall. Shun He wiped his tears in relief. Even after she had walked far away, his tears still hadn't stopped. Shun Qiu sat on the bed and looked at the man who usually shed blood on the battlefield without shedding tears. It's all our fault for protecting Ji too well. I don't know what kind of grievances she suffered in the palace, but she suddenly grew up. She felt gratified and sad at the same time. Tell me, what is Jia thinking? I can clearly feel that her dependence on the regent is much deeper than that of the emperor. Why does she still want to enter the palace? Isn't it better to stay at home when you marry the prince regent? What do you know? Our daughter is eating from the bowl while looking at the pot. You have to choose a man like this. You have to try for a long time to see which one is good and which one is suitable. Hearing this, Shun Qiu couldn't help but glare at him. You talk too much. Every day you talk about your big principles. I don't know what kind of nonsense you are talking about. Chapter 377. Speaking of Shun Yukai, Shun Qiu also looked sad. Who do you think our son is like? He's so useless. How good would it be if he was half as good as Jia? He cries for Jia all day long. Who would dare to marry him in the future? Speaking of which, Shun Qiu paused. Old thing, Yukai is not young anymore. Have you thought about it? What kind of woman can you find for him to suppress him? Still able to suppress him? Shun He rolled his eyes at her. It's good enough that you don't despise him. Although our Shun family is a family of generals and there is no shortage of wives, no woman dares to marry Shun Yukai. When I raised Shuangxi, I planned to take her as my daughter-in-law in the future. Who knew that this little girl was so smart? She knew my plan and immediately followed Jia to pour tea. She also became sworn sisters with Yukai. Thinking of that scene, Shun He couldn't help but have a headache and scolded Shun Yukai several times. This fool. Li Yingying was finally taken back to the palace by Shun Yueji. When getting on the carriage, she deliberately let Li Yingying ride in the same carriage with them and specially asked Feng Zhouqing for his opinion. The man was reading at that time. After hearing her words, the big palm on the book seemed to pause slightly, and then he chuckled. As you say. After Li Yingying got on the carriage, she bowed carefully and respectfully. And the man also talked and laughed with Shun Yueji as if she didn't exist in the carriage. When it came to calligraphy and some musical skills, she really couldn't compare with Li Yingying. When she signaled Li Yingying to interrupt, the man finally looked at her. Perhaps Li Yingying's answer satisfied Feng Zhouqing. When the man looked at her, there was a gentle smile on his lips. Being stared at by the man like this, Li Yingying couldn't help blushing. The gentle man was like an immortal from the heavens, gentle and elegant. He treated people gently and didn't have the airs of an emperor at all. He was more like a gentle son of a noble family. He treated people warmly and courteously. This concubine also just found out that Miss Li is also the daughter of an illustrious aristocratic family. It's only because of some accidents that your family has fallen into such dire straits. In terms of musical skills, Miss Li is much better than this concubine. The moment their eyes met, Shin Yueji seemed to see her past self in Feng Zhouqing's gentle eyes. She still remembered that when she first met Feng Zhouqing, he had looked at her with this kind of gaze. When a man looked directly at a woman, the woman would feel a little uncomfortable. However, although Feng Zhouqing's gaze was looking at a person, it was not ostentatious and direct. In the depths of his pitch-black eyes, there was a polite smile. From time to time, there would be a faint smile on his gentle lips. Whether it was a beautiful girl or a married woman, his gaze would never make people feel rushed. How could Feng Zhouqing not understand her intentions when faced with her words that had a hidden meaning? He chuckled in a low voice. When did the concubine become as considerate as the empress? Recruiting for the emperor's harem was usually something only the empress would do. Jiyu Yuyin was clearly disgusted by this rule, but she still had to pretend to be magnanimous as she recruited for Feng Zhouqing's harem, taking in all the beautiful women in the world. Chapter 378. If your majesty likes it, this concubine, as an imperial concubine, has to do something. Otherwise, your majesty will subconsciously compare this concubine with empress sister and feel that this concubine is not as generous and narrow-minded as empress sister. When did Jin say that? The man slightly raised his eyebrows, and his eyes had already moved away from Li Yingying's charming and pretty face. It fell on Shin Yueji's serious little face. Your majesty, there is an ambush. However, not long after his eyes fell on Shin Yueji's face, the reins of the carriage were suddenly tightened. The horse raised its head and roared, and the carriage shook violently. Li Yingying sat below. After all, she was a weak woman, not like Shin Yueji who came from a family of generals. When the carriage shook violently, her center of gravity was unstable. She didn't know what to hold, and her body subconsciously fell towards Feng Zhouqing. Your Majesty, she exclaimed. The man frowned. One of his hands was holding onto Shin Yueji. The moment he saw her soft body pouncing towards him, his dark eyes wavered. He did not push her away, nor did he take the initiative to reach out to help her. Shin Yueji looked at the man's invisible unfamiliar scene, and the corner of her lips slightly raised. Yes, this was the real Feng Zhouqing. To him, Li Yingying was just a stranger. She had no illustrious identity or background, and all she had was a face that was somewhat similar to hers. If Feng Zhouqing was willing to hold her, it meant that he still had some feelings for her, but he not only didn't, but also waited for her to fall. It was enough to show that the manly demeanor he should have made him unable to push her away. Li Yingying had no background to rely on, so he was too lazy to pay attention to her, even if she had a face that was somewhat similar to his. But for Feng Zhouqing, this was a woman without feelings, even if they had the same face, so what? He could still be so indifferent. Li Yingying was afraid of such a scene. The moment she fell into Feng Zhouqing's arms, she subconsciously hugged the man's waist, and her whole face was buried deep in the man's chest. Your Majesty. Your Majesty. Her voice was soft, trembling, and there was still fear after the shock. The soft and fragrant jade in his arms made the man frown, but he symbolically held her slender waist and comforted her. It's okay. He pushed Li Yingying, who was in his arms, to Shin Yueji beside him and got off the carriage alone. Your Majesty, be careful. Shin Yueji couldn't help but remind him as she watched him get off the carriage. Feng Zhouqing turned around and looked at her. He smiled and nodded slightly in response. This place was Heartbroken Cliff. In the past, it had deepened her feelings for Feng Zhouqing to the point where she had no regrets. The scene from her previous life was about to repeat itself. Even her grip on Li Yingying's arm tightened. Previously, Li Yingying was acting when the horse was frightened. But this time, her hand was really hurting from Shin Yueji's grip. Shin Yueji's grip was really tight and her long nails were digging deep into her flesh. She frowned in pain and said, Your Highness, did I make you unhappy just now? Hearing this, Shin Yueji released her. Seeing that the woman was in so much pain that the color of her pretty little face had almost changed, she seemed to have reacted, and with some guilt, she loosened the shackles on her. Sorry, I lost control of myself for a moment. Did I hurt you? Chapter 379. She saw that her wrist was red and bruised. She could imagine how much strength Shen Yuqing used to hold her just now. Thinking of this, she was secretly surprised. How could she lose her composure to such an extent? Does Imperial Consort like His Majesty? That's why you... No. Shen Yueji interrupted her decisively. She was sure that even if she lost her composure because of Feng Zhouqing, it was not because she liked him. It was because she knew what she was thinking just now. Li Yingying protected her wrist. His Majesty was a rare handsome man. He treated people gently and elegantly. When he talked to people, he looked into her eyes. It did not make people feel that he looked down on her at all. Li Yingying had to admit that she was indeed moved. Even when the horse went out of control just now, it was not because she was afraid, but because it was subconscious. But she did all this according to Shen Yueji's instructions. Didn't Shen Yueji bring her to the palace to seduce the emperor? Although Li Yingying did not understand why Shen Yueji lost her composure just now, she had a woman's intuition that it was because of the emperor. When she raised her head and looked at Shen Yueji again, she found that Shen Yueji's eyes were not on her at all. She did not know when, but she had already lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked outside. Countless black-clothed men descended from the sky, covering the sky and surrounding the carriage. Feng Zhouqing was surrounded by the men in black, and behind him were the secret guards in brocade clothes she brought. Qiu Yang faced 4 or 5 men in black, but he was not at a disadvantage at all. But as time went by, his strength was consumed and he was wounded in several places. Since her previous life, Shen Yueji rarely saw Feng Zhouqing show his martial arts in front of so many people. He alone could deal with more than 10 black-clothed men, and he was not inferior at all. Dressed in a white robe, he was as elegant as an immortal. When he was fighting with the black-clothed man, his moves were swift and elegant like the wind. Before the black-clothed man could react, his palm wind was like lightning, quickly ending the black-clothed man's life. The way out of the broken intestine cliff was blocked. At this moment, they were on the highest slope of the broken intestine cliff. The appearance of the black-robed men was like an endless river, coming wave after wave. When the black-robed men were all killed, many more black-robed men appeared out of nowhere. The group of men in black that Feng Zhouqing brought hiding in the dark had already been injured. Just then, Shen Yueji saw a black-robed man sneaking up on Feng Zhouqing, who was focused on fighting against the black-robed man. As for the man, it was unclear whether he had noticed it or not. The scene before her eyes overlapped with the scene from her past life. Shen Yueji could even see herself from her past life through the scene before her eyes. When the sword was about to stab Feng Zhouqing, she shouted desperately to remind the man to be careful. Even she, who had no abdominal muscles, couldn't help but jump down from the carriage to stand in front of him and take the sword for him. This time it was as if the gods were at work. Shen Yueji did not open her mouth to remind him. Halfway through, when Li Yingying was about to speak, she did not forget to grab her arm and cover her mouth with one hand, so that she could not speak. As Shen Yueji expected, the man's snow-white robe was pierced by the sword and his left arm was injured. Blood immediately flowed from his left shoulder. Chapter 380. Shen Yueji decisively put down the curtain of the carriage. Breaking free from her hand, Li Yingying looked at her in disbelief. "Your Highness, just now, there was a sneak attack on the Emperor from behind. Why did you see it? Why didn't you warn the Emperor?" If Shen Yueji didn't warn her, it would be fine. But why did Shen Yueji suddenly reach out to grab her and cover her mouth when she opened her mouth to warn her? For a moment, Li Yingying felt that the woman in front of her hated the Emperor and wanted him to die. This made her think that Shen Yueji lost her composure and scratched her hand when the Emperor hugged her. These two views were different. Hearing this, Shen Yueji raised her eyebrows. There was no panic on her face. Doesn't Miss Li know that in this dangerous moment, even if you see it, you can't open your mouth to warn me? What? Li Yingying looked at her in confusion. Shen Yueji looked back at her with a faint smile. If you shout, the Emperor will be distracted. When the Emperor was fighting with the men in black, he was very focused. His martial arts is so high, How could he not know that there was someone behind him? If the emperor knew, he wouldn't have been stabbed. No matter how high a person's martial arts is, it can't be compared to a large number of people. Does Miss Li know the consequences if you shout? Those men in black are obviously going to attack the emperor. They don't know that there is someone else in the carriage. No matter what, the emperor will not abandon his woman. Even if Miss Li is still by my side as my maidservant, he will not let an innocent woman take risks. However, if you make a sound, the black-clothed men will know that there is someone else in the carriage. If they want to deal with the emperor, who is highly skilled in martial arts, it will be troublesome enough. Even if there is an endless stream of men in black who appear tirelessly, there will always be an end. When the men in black die, it will be over. But if they know that we are here, they will change their camp and catch us first. At that time, we will become hostages in the hands of the black-clothed men. At that time, not only will we be a burden to the emperor, but even the emperor will also become a fish on the black-clothed men's iron plate because of us. Or is this the result that Miss Li wants to see? Li Yingying had never thought that her momentary worry for the emperor would be seen by Shen Yueji. After listening to her words, it would immediately change. Unfortunately, she couldn't refute Shen Yueji's words. She unexpectedly felt a lingering fear and annoyance. She regretted making a sound just now. She didn't dare to believe that if she made a sound in a moment of desperation, not only would it distract the emperor, but it would also make the black-clothed man realize that they were in the carriage. At that time, the emperor would be forced into a passive situation. Your Highness, she knelt in front of Shen Yueji with lingering fear. It's all my fault. It's all my fault for not being considerate enough. That's why. I almost harmed His Majesty and you. I'm guilty. Please punish me. Chapter 381. I'm afraid he has already rushed over to help His Majesty. The sound of fighting outside was still going on. Feng Jiuqing was injured, and some of the men in black wanted to step forward, but were hesitant. Li Yingying's heart was completely focused on Feng Jiuqing, so she naturally didn't notice the strangeness of the men in black. Sitting in the carriage, Shen Yueji's eyes were tightly locked on the group of men in black. Seeing their hesitation, her lips curved into a smile. Just as Li Yingying was hesitating about what to do, she half opened the curtain and revealed her head, which was noticed by the men in black. Immediately, many men in black abandoned the young emperor and waved the sharp swords in their hands to stab them. Li Yingying was so scared that her beautiful face turned pale, and the color had long changed. She should have screamed subconsciously, but because of Shen Yueji's previous words, she found that she couldn't make a sound even though her mouth was open. Looking at Li Yingying like this, Shen Yueji almost laughed out loud. At the critical moment, she saw that the men in black attacked decisively, with the posture of taking Li Yingying's life with one sword. Frowning, she immediately pulled Li Yingying's arm and used her back to block the attack. Your Highness. Li Yingying was shocked and finally cried out uncontrollably. Jia. Not far away, Feng Jiuqing also noticed them when he heard this cry. The men in black attacked very quickly and didn't show any mercy. It was because the person in front of him was Li Yingying that he planned to take her life with one sword, and then use Shen Yueji as a hostage. It was killing two birds with one stone. But he had never thought that Shen Yueji would actually hand over his back for a woman and bear this sword for her. For a moment, it was difficult to withdraw the sword. Until the long sword was almost about to pierce Shen Yueji's body, the men in black forgot to withdraw. A gust of wind swept past her eyes. Poochie, it was the sound of the long sword cutting into flesh. Shen Yueji was pulled into a warm embrace, and the man's muffled groan came from above her head. A faint smell of blood came from the man's body. Shen Yueji looked at the corner of the snow-white robe that was dyed red with blood, and tears immediately fell from her eyes. Your Majesty. She was distressed and helpless, and even looked at the emperor in front of her with fear. Your Majesty, she was very careful, not daring to touch the wound on his arm. Her tears immediately fell. Emperor, how could you be so stupid? This minister's concubine's life is so lowly, how could you use your body to block it? If something happened to you, what would this minister's concubine do? She sobbed softly. Feng Zhouqing carried her and stood at the edge of the cliff. They were forced into a desperate situation by the men in black. The scene from her previous life repeated once again. The man carefully protected her behind him. His tall and slender body was covered with countless wounds, but it did not show that he was in a sorry state. He stared intently at the men in black who were approaching them. "Whatever you want, come at me." It has nothing to do with her. In this short period of time, a lot of things could happen, without exception. Shen Yueji knew that Feng Zhouqing's troops were lying in ambush not far from the Broken Intestine Cliff. When the time was right, they would come out to rescue them. This group of black-robed men were also Feng Zhouqing's men, and they knew what they would face in the end: death. Chapter 382. Sometimes, even Shen Yueji herself did not understand what benefits Feng Zhouqing had given them. However, some people were like this. Even if you could not give them anything, they would still inexplicably feel that you were good for them. They would die for you without any complaints, without any hesitation, and even sacrifice their lives for you. Shen Yueji was carefully protected behind the man. There was a faint smell of blood on his body. Wounds could be seen everywhere on his body. His snow-white robe had long been dyed red with blood, and his hair was also a little messy. "Your Majesty, I am not afraid. As a woman of the military family, even if I die standing, I will never kneel and beg for mercy. Jia, they are here for me. It has nothing to do with you. As long as I am here, I will not let you suffer any harm." Ph, dog of our emperor, did you ever think that this day would come when you killed more than 100 people of my Liu family? The leader of the men in black pointed his sword at Feng Zhouqing. Shen Yueji didn't know why, but even though she knew he was the one who planned everything, she still felt the man standing in front of her suddenly stiffen. After Feng Zhouqing ascended to the throne, he had killed countless prestigious officials and important ministers in the court within 3 days. Even their wives and children were not spared. At that time, he told the outside world that these people were conspiring to rebel and secretly did things that were detrimental to Feng country and the people of the capital. That was why he ordered them to be beheaded to give an explanation to the people. She was not the only one who was paraded on the streets. These ministers who had sacrificed their lives for Feng country were also paraded on the streets. The people carried baskets of rotten eggs and wild vegetables and threw them at the ministers who were locked in cages. They seemed to have forgotten that during their most difficult times, it was these ministers who felt sorry for them and used their salaries to help them. They also seemed to have forgotten that when they were short of food, those ministers would rather starve themselves to take care of these people. This was also why Shen Yueji did not like to be associated with others. So what if you treated some people well? She was not you, and you were not him. You would never be people of the same world. Some people were good, and some people were evil. An arrow shot toward Feng Zhouqing. Feng Zhouqing did not know what was going on. Perhaps it was because of what the black-clad man had said earlier, but Feng Zhouqing did not react in time. He stood there motionlessly. Li Yingying, who was in the carriage, was already burning with anxiety. She couldn't care less as she shouted, "Your Majesty, be careful." Shen Yueji also came back to her senses at this moment. She pushed Feng Zhouqing heavily, and the unprepared man staggered from the push. Because of her habit, she gave all her strength to him. Under the man's shocked gaze, she was only an arm's length away from the sword. However, she leaned backwards. "Yuji." This time, Feng Zhouqing's calm eyes finally showed some emotion. It was as if the scene before his eyes overlapped with the scene from a few years ago. There was also a person who, in order to push away that fatal arrow, allowed her delicate body to fall down the cliff. At that time, he had a budget, and he pulled her back in time. But this time, he threw himself onto the cliff and grabbed onto Shen Yueji's hand. His arm was dripping with blood and his hand was holding onto Shen Yueji tightly. Chapter 383. At this moment, his heart was in a mess. He didn't understand and was in a daze. He didn't know why his heart was in a mess. His arm hurt. More blood flowed out from his wound, but he didn't dare to let go. Looking at Shen Yueji's pale face, he gripped her hand tightly. Hold on tight, don't let go. I'll pull you up. Your Majesty, as long as you're fine, this concubine can be at ease. You're the emperor of Feng country, nothing can happen to you. Perhaps this concubine. Don't talk nonsense. The man interrupted her with a hint of anger in his voice. Nothing will happen to me, and nothing will happen to you. Blood dripped onto Shen Yueji's face. Apart from the bone-chilling wind blowing on her face, the man's blood also dripped onto her face. She looked up at him from below. At this moment, Shen Yueji felt an inexplicable sense of comfort. Perhaps, in her previous life, she shouldn't have been pulled up by him. Perhaps, she should have pried open his fingers and let herself fall. All of this had been personally planned by him, so why was he still able to show such deep emotions? He was so affectionate that Shen Yueji couldn't see any flaws. Tears flowed from the corner of her eyes. She saw that the man's injured arm clearly couldn't hold her firmly, but it was still strenuous. Your Majesty, let go. If you continue like this, your hand will be crippled. No, the man's smooth forehead was already covered in sweat. He grabbed Shen Yueji's wrist tightly. Use this concubine's strength to climb up. Don't let go. If this concubine uses your Majesty's strength to climb up, your Majesty's arm will really be crippled. Your Majesty, if this concubine dies, will you remember this concubine forever? Don't talk nonsense. The man's voice deepened. This concubine once asked about your Majesty and the former empress. She mentioned Jiyu Yuqin at this time. It was clear that the man's grip on her hand was about to loosen. But very quickly, he reacted and grabbed her hand again. If you have anything to say, just say it. Yueji, listen to me. You can't be stubborn at this time. This concubine orders you to climb up. Before the emperor became the emperor, he and the eldest miss of the Jiyu family went out for a parade. They also encountered a group of assassins in black. At that time, it was also a narrow escape. The emperor risked his life to protect the late empress. The man did not speak. His dark eyes were somewhat indecipherable. Shen Yueji smiled faintly. At that time, the former empress was saved by the emperor, so in the last few years, perhaps the emperor's memory will not be so deep. But if this time, this concubine was not saved by the emperor and fell off the cliff, will the emperor remember this concubine forever? Yuji. Realizing what she was about to do, Feng Zhouqing's heart thumped furiously in his chest as he felt an inexplicable sense of panic. However, Feng Zhouqing only tightened his grip around her. Come up first. I've said that I won't let anything happen to you, so you'll definitely be fine. I still have a group of secret guards hiding nearby. They will be here soon. If you are worried about me, hold on for a while longer. When they arrive, you and I will be fine. Your Majesty, have you ever truly loved someone? Chapter 384. This Kier can feel the emperor's nostalgia and love for the late empress. Sometimes, this Kier feels jealous. In this Kier's eyes, even older sister empress doesn't seem to be as important as a dead person in the emperor's heart. I also want your Majesty to remember that even if your Majesty doesn't love me, I can do what the former empress can do for your Majesty. I can die for your Majesty. I cannot distract your Majesty. Shen Yueji. I order you to climb up. Your Majesty, if there is a next life, I hope that you will no longer be the emperor, and I will not be a woman from a family of generals. We will just be a couple from an ordinary family. The last sentence was a little fake, but also a little sincere. Shen Yueji just couldn't accept it. She was loyal to him, but why did she end up like this in the end? Even if she didn't love him anymore, she still wanted to ask for an explanation. She wanted to know, if they were just a couple from an ordinary family, would he still use her so much? Would he treat her sincerely? Or, could it be that he still had his own ambition? Would he give himself to someone else and get what he deserved in return? He would climb up step by step. Even if he wasn't the emperor, he would climb to the highest position. That was him. Your Majesty, your hand is bleeding, and I feel distressed. I like you so much, I won't let your hand be ruined because of me. She opened the man's big hand, one by one, under the man's dark eyes. The man's eyes widened, and his thin lips almost turned red. Shun Yueji. The 3 words were squeezed out from the gap of his teeth, and then he saw that his already numb hand was opened by her, and her whole body was falling uncontrollably. Her beautiful dress had been dyed red with blood, and even her plain face was covered with his blood. There was a smile at the corner of her mouth, as if it was a lifetime ago. He seemed to see the woman who, for him, no matter how much she suffered, would raise her head to smile at him quietly, and say that she was fine. At that moment, his heart suddenly hurt so much that he felt like he was about to suffocate. He rubbed his chest, and it felt like someone was pulling at his heart over and over again, causing him to feel endless pain and suffering. However, it didn't want to kill him. How did this happen? Things shouldn't have developed this way. There should have been another ending. It shouldn't have been like this. He would have been fine, Shun Yueji would have been fine, and they would all be fine. This wasn't the ending he wanted. It wasn't. His hidden guards, who were lying in ambush not far away, had all arrived, and the group of black-clothed men were quickly subdued. He looked at the leader of the black-robed men and walked toward him. He used his sword to lift the black veil on his face. It was a completely unfamiliar face, and it was filled with hatred. It was so undisguised that it shocked him so much that he took several steps back. It was an unfamiliar face, but it was familiar to him. The eldest son of the Liu family, Liu Qiancheng, he was a person who had been dead for a long time. Dog Emperor, you didn't expect this, did you? Chapter 385. He laughed until tears came out of his eyes. Looking at Feng Zhouqing's dark eyes, he didn't even bother to talk nonsense. He directly bit the poison in his mouth and died with blood flowing out of his 7 orifices. He had never thought of going back alive from this assassination. He knew that with his martial arts, he would not be Feng Zhouqing's opponent. Even if it was a meticulous plan, he still wouldn't be able to kill Feng Zhouqing. But for him, it was enough. All of this was enough. Feng Zhouqing staggered and lost his former gentleness and elegance. Qiu Yang saw that there was something wrong with him and quickly went forward to support him. Your Majesty, this subordinate was negligent this time. This subordinate will definitely order a thorough investigation to see who leaked the information. As for Imperial concubine Shun, send someone to look for her. Your Majesty, if she's alive, I want to see her corpse. Yes. Qiu Yang didn't dare to hesitate and led the men in black behind him to search. The broken intestines cliff was so high that it looked like it was shrouded in fog from top to bottom. There was fog everywhere. Even if a person with good qinggong fell down, it would be difficult to escape death, let alone a woman like Shun Yueji. On the steep cliff, Shun Yueji looked at the man who was holding her in his arms. His chiseled facial features were cold, and his thin lips were pursed into a straight line. His black eyes were filled with endless hostility. If it weren't for the fact that he was tightening his grip on her hand, she would have thought that the man in front of her had become a walking corpse. Mo Wushang, why are you here? The 2 of them fell into the dark cave. The man hadn't put her down yet, but Shun Yueji had already jumped down from his arms and looked at him up and down. The man raised his eyebrows and looked at her coldly. If I'm not here, where do you think I should be? Have you been waiting here for a long time? The man didn't speak, but his cold aura was the best response to Shun Yueji's question. Not only had he been guarding here since a long time ago, deeply afraid that something would happen to her, he had even heard every word that she had said to Feng Zhouqing. Not a single word was missed. She knew he was worried about her. Shun Yueji wiped the blood off her face. I have my own plans, and I've been here before, so I know where to hide. I won't fall to my death. Even if you don't catch me, I'll be fine. At most, when she rolled inside, her wrist would be scratched a little, but this was nothing to Shun Yueji. But seeing the man's face, which was obviously not easy to get along with, if he could freeze just now, not to mention freezing now, he would even implicate others to be frozen together with him. Mo Wushang, what's wrong? I've already said that I know what I'm doing and that I won't hurt myself. In your heart, what exactly do you think I am? Why didn't you discuss such a dangerous matter with me? Or do you think that I don't have the qualifications to protect you? I didn't, you. If I didn't come here in person, would you let me know that Feng Joqing sent an order to the world saying that you fell off the cliff in order to save him? Mo Wushang, what's wrong with you? The next moment, the man gripped her wrist tightly, not allowing her to break free at all. Chapter 386. Now that I've finally managed to keep you by my side, don't make me feel afraid, okay? I've said it before, Mo Wushang, I know what I'm doing. Before this, you also promised me that you wouldn't interfere in my affairs. I have my reasons for doing this. Moreover, you're so busy every day and have your own things to do. I don't want you to spend all your time on me. This will make me feel, how can anything compare to you, Jia? You know that I don't care about anything. I only care about you. I don't need to do anything. I just want to stay by your side, accompany you, take care of you, and not let anyone hurt you. But you keep rejecting me. In your heart, I've never existed, right? No matter what you do, you disdain to mention it to me. Even if you put your life on the line, I don't deserve to know, right? Men were born to be people of few words. In both her previous lives, the only change was that Mo Wushang was more thick-skinned and shameless when he spoke to her. But sometimes, his words were still pitifully few. But he wouldn't say so much to her all at once like today. Moreover, they were all words from his heart. That dull and low voice was full of helplessness and pain, just like a person who had been abandoned by her. Shen Yueji was just about to push him away and explain when she was caught off guard. She felt a warm sensation on her neck. She was shocked. His crying. She felt the man's tears falling on her neck. 1 drop, 2 drop, soaking her neck until it was boiling hot. For a moment, she was dumbfounded. She stood rooted to the ground, not knowing what to say or how to react. After a long time, the man hugged her without letting go. It was so long that Shen Yueji didn't know how long it had been. In short, she felt that a long time had passed. Mo Wushang, I really didn't mean to hide it from you. To me, it's really a small matter. I care about my life more than anyone else. How can I put myself in danger? I didn't tell you because I can do it on my own. I don't need to rely on men to do what I want to do. Secondly, I've wasted too much of your time these days. I know that you have a lot of things to deal with in private, so I really don't want to trouble you. I'm sorry for making you worry. I promise I won't do it again. Shen Yueji's heart is very uncomfortable, but she still grabs the man's sleeve. Next time, if there is such a thing, I will discuss it with you personally, don't be angry, okay? She struggled to get up from the man's arms. However, the man hugged her tightly and didn't give her a chance to break free. That tight strength seemed to want to melt her into his bones. Mo Wushang, you've hugged me for so long. My body is covered in blood. I want to find a place with water to clean myself. I feel very uncomfortable like this. The man hugged her and did not have the slightest intention of letting go. Hey, don't you think the smell of blood on my body is disgusting? As long as it's from you, it won't smell bad. The man was silent for a long time before he spoke. Shen Yueji suddenly smiled. I'm not that stupid to make myself bleed. The blood on this body belongs to Feng Joqing. As long as you don't mind, you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.